And it's a burden that we carry as African women because we often have to stand in the place of a lot of things. You become the educator, you have to coddle people, handle their emotions, and still deal with your own stuff. One thing I've been doing is I've been learning to say no. And there's this phrase that I really love that says, women's bodies are not your classrooms. So if I can educate myself, you can as well.
This is Selam and Hello, where stories of joy and justice vibrate with the rhythm of Africa and the diaspora.
We're worried, anxious group of people trying to move along. Maybe one day we'll get onto something. Until then we say, hold on.
Selam and hello, everyone. My name is Lilly Piper, and thank you for joining us today. I hope over the last few weeks, you've really enjoyed this series that we've been in, The Case for Hope. I find that every time we've had a guest on, from Maya Masikur to Doug Mutai, I've learned something new that I could then go apply in my own life. And I've really been grateful for their voices and their stories. Today, we are continuing the series with an episode we're calling The Case for Choice. So when you hear that word choice, what comes to the surface for you? What is top of mind? Is it economic autonomy? Is it, having independence in the way that you live? I think as women, the word choice automatically touches a nerve. For me, it immediately centers my health and the decisions I can make around my own body. As a woman of the diaspora, born in the continent, who's lived abroad, my experience with access to choice has really varied. When I grew up in the United States, abortion was legal. It was, I forget what the term is, but it was a part of the protected law on the federal level. So you could access it if you're underage, if you're overage, but it was a resource in your reproductive health. In 2022, of course, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned Roe v. Wade, and now access to abortion is decided state by state. And we've seen many states in the United States start to really roll back women's access, not only to safe abortions, but just to reproductive services in general, whether that is access to certain kinds of birth control or health care for marginalized and poor women. When we look at the continent, the story is not so dissimilar. In 2005, the African Union passed the Maputo Protocol, which basically said that women's rights are human rights, full stop. It's interesting that it actually took an entire protocol to define that for us. Prior to that, I guess it was maybe assumed but not implemented. Since that time in 2005, almost all but 3 countries have signed the Maputo Protocol, but several others still remain to ratify it, including some of our neighbors in Eritrea and Botswana. So that asks the question, what is the case for choice in the continent? When it comes to reproductive health, when it comes to access to services, do women have all the choice that they deserve, that human rights tell us should be accessible and available no matter where you live and no matter who you are? Recently, one of my producers brought to my attention the story of Muthoni Gitau. And I was fascinated by this young Kenyan woman who had taken into her own hands her own choices about her future. And what's most interesting is how radical that idea feels, that you can have bodily autonomy and demand the rights that you are inherently born with in a legal context that does not always include your rights. And I think it's really important that beyond the legal framework, we start having more conversations with our sisters, with our friends, with our daughters, with our coworkers, with our families, with our churches, with whatever communities that we're in about the women's right to choose and the women's right to live. So today, my guest, Muthoni Gitau, wears many, many hats. She's a content creator. She has a fantastic and fun YouTube channel where you can see her renovating homes and creating inspiration through, whether she's making a lamp or she's redecorating a space in her home. She hosts a radio show, called She Talks for Power Radio. She has a podcast called Just Doing Life. She does all the things, and she is a cat mom of 3, a 3-time cat mom. So between us, we have 3 cats, I like to say. And Muthoni has been very public about her story about being child-free. And a few months ago, she took it a step further and actually opened up her life for public engagement around her choice to get a tubal litigation, meaning her options for having a biological child do not exist, that she's just made that choice for herself. And so while we are not trying to have necessarily a legal or policy conversation today, I do think it's helpful to investigate one woman's story, understand it more deeply, and then find ourselves in that context. What do we believe? Are we operating under assumptions? Have we actually investigated ideas more fully? Have we thought beyond the way we were raised and actually examined why we do things and why we believe what we do? So Muthoni, I'm so glad to have you here today and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lily. I'm like, I should be calling you anytime someone asks me, so what do you do? I'm like,
Pause.
Just let me add someone to this call.
Well, it's, you do so many things. And I think your ability to express your ideas and your beliefs and values at all of your platforms is a rare ability. I think a lot of people change per context, but you're who you are wherever you are.
Yes, always.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit before we jump into the topic at hand today, how you got into the content creation world and what your path has been in media.
I think I just fell into it by chance. I think, maybe not. It started with watching the Tyra Banks show when I was like a teenager.
Okay.
And I was always like, I'd want to have a talk show one day. And I remember I think it was 2014, I gathered my friends and I was like, let's have a conversation on how we can have this talk show.
2014,
yes.
Okay.
And when I called them for a meeting, it was based off of what they could offer me for my talk show. So I had a friend who owned a camera. I had a friend who was also a scriptwriter like myself and a friend who used to do sound. So I was like, between the four of us, we can do
figure
something.
This out. Yeah.
And after the meeting, they ghosted. So I was always like, hey guys, so when can we start? And then we never started. And I just forgot about it until later that year. Someone kept asking me questions about how I used to do my lipstick. There's this red lipstick I used to wear and it's like, glorious. And people kept asking me, it's like, so which lipstick is this? And then I would tell them the lipstick, they'd go buy it and they're like, it does not look like yours. How do you wear it?
Oops.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'm tired of answering this question. If I did a video, because that time I was watching a lot of YouTube, I was like, if I did a video, I could just send you a video and you see how I do it. And then that's how I just started creating content. It started with that one video about wearing lipstick.
And here you are.
Then I started doing skincare stuff. And then I used to do crafty stuff over the weekend, but I never used to film. And then I'd post the results of my crafts. And then people were like, oh, do you have a video on this? And I'm like, actually, I don't.
Yeah.
Could you make a video on this?
You're like,
and I just ended up going in that direction. And it's just been building on it I'll be hitting 10 years next year.
well done. Whoa, to stay alive in this media ever-evolving ecosystem is a struggle bus, let me tell you. But well done to you to stick around and to keep changing and evolving and keeping up and creating content. You've got a fantastic followership and engagement online. And so let's move to this topic. And at what point do you make the decision to go from maybe sharing lipstick tutorials and, crafty tutorials to opening up your personal life to, investigation and curiosity?
I think I was just trying different ways of sharing my content. So initially I would just do voiceovers, I'd do stuff and then just have a voiceover. And then I felt like that was too much work. And I was like, I can just explain the things when I'm doing them, right? So I start just doing we'll just do it vlog style. And then eventually how I started doing the vlog bits, the lifestyle stuff, was because I wanted to supplement my DIY content, because sometimes certain projects would take longer to finish and then I wouldn't have a video. So I was like, I can just do a vlog and then I have another video. And then now this is how it's so what are we talking about? Cool. I have cats. I like cooking and we're cleaning up after our DIY, and that's just how
eventually creeps into the personal from that.
Yes.
Yeah, the cats are what's it called? The entry drug? What's that called? Is that the right term, for into your life?
Yeah.
So, you are a public person and you've made yourself available online for questions and engagement from your followers. Before we kind of talk about what that's been like to share, your own story there, on the personal level, at what point did you start to wrestle with this idea of whether or not you wanted to have kids and what that would mean for you as a young Kenyan woman in the continent? I mean, this is home, right? Nairobi is home for you.
Yes.
So tell me, at what point did you really start to question that future? How old were you and how did that conversation come to be?
I think the questioning bit started like when I was about 18, but the knowing started when I was 10. And I remember at that time my mom was pregnant with my brother, our third born. And I don't know, just randomly we were having a conversation and my aunt was there and she was asking me, it's like, oh, so like, what do you want to do with your life? And I just start painting this picture. And I was talking about how I'm traveling the world with this partner that I have. And I even remember sharing a story about what my wedding would be like. And my intention was to walk on water for some reason. But I had to also have like a gown and sneakers, like really cool sneakers. So I share this story and my aunt just goes like, and where are your kids when you're doing all this? And I was like, what kids?
Wow.
That was my first, I didn't know what it was, but I was like, oh, no, there are no kids in this picture. This is just like me and my life.
Yeah.
And I think when I was about 18, that's when I was just like, okay, so this thing, by the way, what's it about? But I think it's also like growing up, the place I grew up in, there were a lot of early pregnancies. So I was just like observing and I'm seeing people getting pregnant and I'm just like, hey, so what causes the pregnancies? And you hear, oh, so you're like, okay, cool. So we'll stay away from that.
Yeah.
And I honestly just kept to myself because I saw that pipeline basically where it was like you'd become a statistic and I didn't want to become a statistic.
I'm curious, in your growing up, when you're saying you're observing kind of young pregnancies, were you getting any kind of formal, not education, but like conversation? I know some communities have traditions of, I think it's sensas, is that right? Who kind of come and do the sex talk with you, or the auntie who's the designated like sex expert who will come and give you. Did you have anybody engaging you around the topic?
No. If anything, I don't think anyone has ever talked to me about sex and the consequences of it. Nothing. I don't think we've ever had the conversation. And no one was talking to us, even when we were younger, which is very sad if you think about it.
Yeah.
So I think people were just like curious, or I don't know what it was, but also there's the idea that when you look back at it, there was abuse because it was always like kids I was in school with, but the people who got them pregnant are like adults.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're not seeing abuse. You're just thinking, oh, so-and-so has a boyfriend. Must be nice. But you don't see the implications of what that actually means. And then you'd see them drop out of school and then they never go back to school. And then now they have to like start doing like just, I don't know, any type of job. Then these guys would disappear. Now these kids are being raised by like their parents. And it was a very, very common thing. And I remember just thinking, wow, I never want that to be me.
Yeah.
And so for me, one thing, I made a pact with myself and I said, I'm never going to have sex until I'm at least 21. Because I was like, at 21, I think I would know what I'm doing. I assumed I would have more information about what it's about, what it means. And it was just like a pact I made. It had nothing to do with religion or anything.
Yeah.
I just looked at the situation around me and I was just like, I think I would want to have more information before I delve
Take that
into
step.
things.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of profound that you were kind of educating yourself, setting up your own expectations, your own culture almost around sex because what you saw around you was enough to inform your early thinking around it. Did you have, so you mentioned you had a brother who was,
Yes.
do you have another brother or a sister? Or?
Yeah, I have two brothers and a sister,
Yeah,
but
sister.
Unfortunately I'm the firstborn. So.
Listen, we have to stick together. Us firstborn African
I
daughters.
did not ask for this.
That's another show altogether, isn't it? I'm wondering, so, as you're thinking through this and you're making these decisions, what were the conversations around you? Because you're 100% right about that issue of abuse. It's something we all know. Whether or not we talk about it and expose it, I think the pandemic did a bit of exposing because we're like 100,000 girls are getting pregnant in Kenya in 6 months and they're all at home.
Yeah.
How are they pregnant, And so it's there. It's part of the background of our context. But I'm wondering, in your conversations, when you're starting to say, okay, I'm going to wait till 21, were you affirmed by friends, your sister, other people, women in your life? Was there I'm just amazed at, like, as an individual, you're just making up this this path for yourself almost, because most people do it in a religious context, right? Church is saying this, or parents are saying this.
For me, people didn't even know about the pact. It was just a decision that I made for myself. It was a choice I made for myself. And also one of the other things is I don't like people. So I stayed in the house a lot. So if I didn't need to be outside, I was not outside. I'll either be watching something or reading something. So I used to keep to myself a lot. And then I also have this thing where I'd like to chase my curiosities. So whenever I'm curious about something, I'll go learn more about it. So at that point, I remember after high school, I wanted to be a DJ. And then my parents were like, well. Can we revisit this after you become an accountant or something? And I was like, accounts? I don't see myself doing that. But we made a pact. Again, I think I make too many pacts. Where it was like, okay, you'll go study, you'll go to campus because you need to have papers to get work. And I was like, cool, let's see what's out there. And I remember doing rounds, and initially I was like, I'll just do something in journalism. And then I saw mass communication. I was like, so what's this? And they were like, with this one, you can do multiple things within the Nini space. I was like, more options. I'll take that one.
Yeah.
So I go back home and we agree, cool. So I'll do mass communication. Then once I'm done, I'll go to DJ school. And then we're like, good. And at the same time, I started going to the theater a lot more. I had seen this play when we were in school, when we were in high school. Was it Kifo Kisimani? And I was just like fascinated by the actors. So I used to hang out at the National Theatre, go watch plays. And then one time I go for an audition and I get picked for a role. And I'm just like, okay. So I go do this theatre stint. And now what that would do is when I wasn't in class, I was doing rehearsals. So I was hardly ever at home. I didn't have time to just be random. So I think keeping to myself, and I was just chasing the things that I enjoyed, kind of safeguarded me. But conversations, no one was talking to me about it. No one was like, so you hang around boys a lot or anything like that? No. Yeah.
So you're now many years later. I have no idea how old you are, because the
33,
beauty of Black people, 33.
Turning 34.
Okay, so happy birthday in advance. So you're many years later after those campus years, and life starts to life, right? You graduate, your jobs have to come, and you have to figure out where to live, and all those kind of decisions. That 21-year-old pact that you're like, I'm going to wait. How did that then evolve to the next step of actually that 10-year-old me was right, and I actually don't want to have kids? Was there a moment that you would recall that became clear to you as an adult?
Not really. I just think whenever I'd have conversations with people and, I don't even know. I think when I was 23 is when I was just like, this is like a for sure thing. Okay, it's like a for sure thing.
It's a permanent thing. Yeah.
And that's when I was just like, cool. So I think at that point, I was like seeing people and I'd talk to people and then they'd be like, I don't want to have kids. And they'd immediately go like, good for you. But okay, that does not involve me. And that's when I was like, okay, so this looks like a thing. And then that's when I started wondering, okay, so if I did not want to have children, what are some of the things that I can do to make sure that happens? And I remember that was the first time I made a call about getting a tubal ligation.
Really? At 23?
Yeah, at 23. And when I made that call, they were like, well, you're too young. And they were like, I was asked so many questions, and they brought religion into it. They brought my parents.
And when you're saying this is the healthcare provider?
Yes, the healthcare providers. And I was asked about this future imaginary husband that I would have. What if they wanted to have children? And I just keep remembering, I was like, but that's not a me problem. That has nothing to do with me. And that was the first time I felt like, wait, are you trying to tell me that this is not up to me? And I was just like,
really?
I thought I can decide these things for myself. And I think at that point, that's when I was like, I was very sure that that's the path that I wanted to take. I wanted to be child-free. And I think for me, it was more like, I made the decision and I was like, cool, so I'm just not going to have kids. That was it.
That's it.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because what I've read and seen of your story has been more recent years.
Yes.
And I wonder if we had gone back to that 23-year-old Muthoni, would you have a different story to tell? And would it be more around the access piece? I don't know.
I think one of the things that I also learned around that time was access to information was not like, there wasn't that much information about what it means to be child-free. There was no community. I think right now a lot more people are talking about it. So there's community. So there's people you can have conversations with. And even like when I was even making the call about a tubal ligation, I didn't have like a great understanding of what does that actually mean. So I think at that point, the information that I had or all I knew I could access were like, meds to just keep myself safe.
Yeah.
But then like I remember the first contraceptive I got on was making me sick. I would have to give up like about an hour to 2 hours of my day because it was like pill.
Yeah.
So anytime I would take it, I'd just be like, ugh.
Dreading, yeah.
2 hours gone like that because I'd be sickly, I'd feel nauseous, and there was just like too much happening. And then like around that time, I don't know. Okay, this is something I don't mind sharing. By chance, I actually end up getting pregnant. And I was like, this is the sheets. But again, access to information was not very good. So I remember walking into, like I spoke to someone and they're like, oh, we can help you with that. You don't got to worry about it. Just give me some money. And then they give me some pills and just don't tell me much about it. And then...
Is this a chemist or is this just...
Yeah, it was like just a pharmacist.
Okay.
And it ends up just becoming like this really terrible experience. I end up going to the hospital later because like I was in so much pain. And even like that, I was so scared to even tell them what happened that I actually didn't. I didn't tell them what happened. And I felt so alone in that moment, but it is what it is. But that was the moment I was like, oh wow, like we really don't have information about these things. And then I started really educating myself on all the things.
Yeah.
All the things. But everything I've done, I've had to learn on my own.
Which says something, I guess, in continuing about our culture, as much as we might have a Maputo protocol or other provisions here and there, if you don't have access to information about how you can safely take care of yourself, then we're missing so much. If it's not coming from, our community, if it's not coming from our families, if it's not coming from our school, if it's not coming from even when you're asking healthcare providers, this is what I would like, and you're not getting it.
Yeah.
We've left women really out there. After that experience, and thank you for sharing, I don't take that lightly that you would share that with us. Did that experience change how you felt about having kids in future? As much as the physical piece of it was uncomfortable, mentally, did it shift your thinking, pause it?
No.
Yeah.
It sounds terrible to say. I was like,
But see, you're saying it sounds terrible to say, but you're so confident in it. So what do you feel is terrible to say?
No, it's like, because there's people who would feel like, okay, I think I've had conversations with people who, let's say, who've had an abortion before, and they talk about how for them, they felt like really guilty. And there's even someone who I know who has an ultrasound of like their pregnancy before. And for him, it was like, I can't tell you what date it was. I just, there was no attachment to it. So that's the part that feels terrible to say, because for other people, it's like, oh my God, it's like, the people say, life starts at conception and all the things. But for me, that's like, that's not my belief. I was like, I don't want this. I don't want this.
Yeah.
And so for me, being able to get an abortion, as much as it was a terrible experience in itself, I would still choose that over having a child. Yeah.
So now you're, again, more years beyond even that experience. As you get older, how does your thinking clarify to the point where you can share it with others in a more public way? Because at that point when you were 23, were you on a public platform? I know you've been doing media for about 10 years, but were you sharing that publicly?
No.
Okay.
No, at that point, no.
So,
but like now it's something that I don't mind sharing, because first of all, it's a part of who I am. And also I think for me, I don't mind sharing my story if it's going to help someone else. So I just,
Yeah. So what's your current state? Let's do that. And then I'd love to hear kind of what you're hearing from people as in this public discourse that's gone from the personal to the public.
Yeah.
Tell us your journey in the last year.
In the last year, okay, so the decision's still there. I was like, I don't want to have kids. And then by chance, so I'd wanted to get a tubal ligation again when I was 27. So 23, they said I was too young. They said I had to wait. So I think when I was about 27, 28, I tried again. And at that point, I was in a relationship with someone, and we went in for a conversation. And it was quite interesting because when we went in, I was grilled. Kidogo, they were about to ask me for my great-grandfather's, I don't know, blood, whatnot. It was like a lot of grilling.
And again, a proper medical facility.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like they're asking me questions about religion. And I noticed it was more about them. And I was removed from the conversation. And at that point, the person I was seeing was also there. And there's no grilling. They were just, oh, so you want to get a vasectomy? Cool. So this is what that means. And I was just like, I remember being like,
wow.
What about his future wife?
Yeah.
You do not care about her? Because you tend to care so much about what my future husband might want. And first, like that difference, the stark difference in how I was questioned and how for him it was just like, yeah, sure. It's a decision you can make. Again, goes back to, are you trying to tell me I can't make choices about what happens to my body? I can't come here and say, this is what I want, do it. And regardless of what your thoughts are and what your feelings are, you go like, okay, sure, she knows what she wants. And at that point within the relationship, we're like, okay, cool. It would be easier for you to get the vasectomy instead. It was a whole conversation, blah, blah. Anyway, the relationship ended. We don't care. So we move on. We move on to like now last year. So the relationship has died. I am single happily. And
till people see this video.
And then a friend of mine comes across a poster where there was this run and they were doing like free tubal ligations. And I remember I made the call, and the first thing I knew they were going to ask was my age. And I was like, I was already waiting for the session, the grilling session. So I hadn't even made the call yet. I shared the poster on my stories. Then someone messaged me and said, I called them and they said that I can't get the tubal ligation because I don't have a child yet. So I was like, wait a minute. So I call them and I go like, hi, so I don't have a child and I want the tubal ligation. And we have this whole conversation with this guy. It was a man on the other end of the line. And so he asked me my age and he was like, so are you sure you don't want to have children? I said, yes. And he said, so I was like, so I also heard that there's someone who called and he said, if they don't already have a child, that then they can't get. So is this closed off to only people who already have children? And he said, maybe it's an age thing. So I was like, cool. So I'll show up and and they were like, yes. So they booked me the appointment and everything. And so I call back the other lady and I tell her, call them and then just talk to them because they've just approved mine. And I was like, I had booked an appointment. So I was like, it was for a Wednesday. Then I happened to be working that Wednesday. So I was unable to go. Then they called me and they're like, oh, you weren't able to come? I was like, yeah, I was working. So they're like, cool, we have another one that's happening next month. Do we book you in for that one? I was like, yes.
This is just the contrast to me is very stark. I know years have passed between 27 and 30-something, but the fact that number one, it's on a poster for like a run, you said? Like a 5K or something.
Okay, no, so it was basically like a partnership between the government and this, are we supposed to say they're a thingy?
It's up to you.
It's like a health, whatever.
A health organization?
No,
sure.
It's like they're not paying you.
Sure.
But like,
noted. Content creation.
So it was like a partnership between the government and a specific
health provider?
institution.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
And
a legitimate health provider.
Yes.
Okay.
And they offer like maternal health type facilities, whatever.
Yeah.
So, and then also there was something a bit suspicious about this government initiative thing, in that in the areas they were doing these things. Because that was the first thing I clocked. I looked at it and I was like, this sort of
was it
communicates.
northern Kenya and different
No, it
things
was
like that?
in
or-
like very low income areas.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, so it's like you're trying to sort of mitigate something. That's what it felt like for me. But it was like it's open to everyone. And then also when I made the mistake of sharing it, they got more calls
Interesting.
from people who are just like, yeah, we saw this on Muthoni's page. Can we come? And I think a lot of people have actually gone thanks to me posting it. And I think it's also because it's something I share publicly. So a lot of people, when they get that information from me, they're like, oh, she's one of us. I think that's
Yeah.
I think that's the message it sends. So basically, that's what they were doing. So I got
Okay.
it for free.
Okay.
Didn't pay a cent.
So there's this public campaign. You tap into it. You go. You couldn't make it the first time. They even call you back with a follow-up.
So nice.
Without all the grilling. It's like a service better than at some of our restaurants. And they have you come in the next month
Yes.
for this service.
Yeah.
And at that point, was there grilling now? Was there more of an investigation of your future and histories and all that?
No, I was very lucky that the future husbands did not come into play. But what happened is the doctor walked us through the procedure, explained exactly what it was going to be, what he was going to do. At what point are you going to feel pain, if any? There is pain. But like it was a very detailed walkthrough of the process. And then now I had to sign a consent form and say, I have given you permission to go ahead and tie my tubes. But I was ready. Hey, I was so ready for that question about husbands. I was prepared. I had a whole monologue.
Yeah.
They stole my moment, but it's fine. I had a whole monologue prepared, but that didn't come up. However, during the procedure, because there were people in the room, I did get questions, but it felt more like there was a bit of curiosity because at this point, you're not going to be like, we've already cut her open, stop. We are worried about the future husband now. No. So it was more like from a point of curiosity because there was like an older woman who was supposed to help me through the painful parts, but I found her more irritating than anything. But it's also because of how I handle pain. It's like, I don't want you to talk to me.
Right.
Like,
This is not the
but
time.
you're asking me questions.
Yeah.
Like, no, why are we talking about going to church now? At this moment, you thought
Yeah.
this is the best time for us to have this conversation? Madam.
Yeah.
But it was more just like she was asking me questions, but like, oh, so does your mother know you're here? I was like, no. It's like, does anyone in your family know? So it was just like, but she was very curious. And then there was another person who did ask me. It's like, oh, so are you seeing someone? And I was like, no. They're like, okay. So the husband didn't come up.
The husband did come up. He was there in the room. As much as these questions felt inappropriate and invasive, and I'm putting words in your mouth by describing it as such, but that's my interpretation of what you said. Did you understand the reasons behind the questions? Could you understand why they would ask them?
Yes. And also I think it's also because I look younger than I am. So sometimes when people look at me, they go like, oh, she's so young. Why is she doing this? Because even like when we were in the room, the question about my age did pop up and they're like, oh, okay. So I think I understand where it comes from. It comes from a point of like, but why wouldn't you want this? Or in like, this is usually what people do. Why do you want to do something different? Why do you want to stand out? Or why are you not following the path that's set out? So sometimes I understand. I get when it comes from a point of curiosity and just wanting to know. And I can tell when it comes from a point of malice. So just like, there's people who think they know better than us. Or you think you're better than us. I'm like, I didn't say it.
You know, it's so I feel in this 2024 of ours where we have access to information and culture from around the world, if we have that access, I feel like we're constantly living in this tension between this Africanness that we hold and what some people would interpret as a Western point of view towards reproductive health. You know, they would say this is a very like Western thing. It's not who we are. It's not who we are as Africans. Even when people are calling out, you know, abuse in certain places, they're like, oh, we don't shame our, you know, our forefathers, our fathers or whatever. And I'm like, okay, but what does African have to be with those things? Being African is also being free, isn't it? Yes. So when you're and I know you haven't even finished your story about the thing. I just have so many questions about those people in the room with you as much as I have about you.
Yes.
And of course you can't speak for them, but hearing your story, it feels like to me that you were in the room for a procedure, and in that room with you was culture, patriarchy, history, colonialism, Western influence, media. Like I feel it was not a singular experience. And there's something about that that really grieves me. As being a woman myself and having had kids, it's such a vulnerable moment when your reproductive system is on a table.
Literally.
There's literally no more vulnerable moment. And so for that moment then to also have to carry with you a presence of mind to navigate, okay, this is not what she means, it's da-da-da-da. Okay, I know he's asking me this, but I'll just give him a quick, like you're doing the most. You're having to do the most. And
I'm still dealing with the pain.
The emotional, psychological. Yeah.
It is a lot. So I think it sucks.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say. It sucks to have to, because it's like when you even have conversations with women, or you can have conversations with people, and then there's something you'll say and someone go like, especially a man, will go like, oh, I've never thought of that. And it's like something as simple as, oh, what time is it? Is it safe for me to walk to the road from here? And someone would be like, yeah, sure, it's safe. And I remember like last week in the office, and I wanted to walk somewhere, and then it was 3 guys. And I was like, is it safe to walk here? And they were like, yeah. And then I was like, but you're guys.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, it probably would be safe for you, but I have to take other things into consideration. And it's a burden that we carry as African women, because we often have to stand in the place of a lot of things. You become the educator, you have to coddle people, handle their emotions, and still deal with your own stuff. One thing I've been doing is I've been learning to say no. And there's this phrase that I really love that says, women's bodies are not your classrooms. So if I can educate myself, you can as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, that's what you've had to do your whole life, is find out, because it was not there for you. No one handed you the option, said, hey, pick whatever you like. You can be whatever you like. No, I have to find and make the road, actually.
Yep.
So you have the process, you have the procedure, you recover from the physical piece, still carrying all of everything else that goes with it. When you start talking about it publicly, what are some of the first reactions you get?
So there's the people who come and say, hey, good for you for taking this into your own hands. And then there's always those ones who come like, these things you people are doing, they are going to haunt you in the future. And I was like, bring it on. So sometimes I think I understand that people place their own biases on things. It's like you're coming with your minimal understanding of what this is. And the one thing I keep hearing is like, the hormones, they'll have nowhere to go. And at this point, I just tell people like, that's not how hormones work. Like, sorry, it's not how it works, because they don't know what the procedure is. They don't understand what it means. They don't understand if it affects you in certain ways, but immediately you want to just start saying, these things you people are doing. I'm like, first of all, who's you people? It's just me. I don't have multiple personalities. Thank you very much. But they don't even take the time to first like just understand what is it that you did and what does it mean for you. So for me, one thing, people think it's very cocky to say, but me, like, if there's one thing, it's like, no one can tell me shit about myself. I know myself best. I know the things that I want for myself. And you can't come 2 seconds in and go like, Muthoni, I think I know what's best for you now.
But that's how we've always done it, right? Yeah. In this context of ours, is that the systems of power have decided what is best, what are the norms.
Yes.
If not what's best, this is the normal thing to do.
And why are you thinking that you get to be special enough to not follow the rules that have already been set out? So sometimes I think it also comes from a point of jealousy. It's like...
Well, when you think about family now and legacy, how do you think about it?
It's funny that you use the word legacy. It's because it's a word that's thrown around a lot. Whenever someone just says, I don't want to have children, it's like, what about your legacy? And the funny thing, when you bring it back to the African context, is that even when people talk about legacy, it's never the woman's legacy that's being carried on. My name disappears. Like the moment you have a child and suddenly people forget your name, you stop being Muthoni and you become Mama Nani, and your identity is slowly erased with these things. I'm like, our context doesn't even allow for my legacy to be, continued. It's always like the man I'm attached to, their legacy continues because we name the kids after whoever, and then they take your last name, and then easily I'm just erased and I disappear. And I'm just another caretaker. And then after that, it's like all these kids, because when I think about like my great-grandmothers, I've had to go find out about them by talking to different people. So I know way too much about my grandfathers because people are always talking about them. They bought this land, they did this. But when it comes to my grandmothers, I don't know much about them. I was actually shocked when I found out that I had this really badass grandmother who used to sit on men. And I was like, oh my God.
Okay, say more about her.
She used to use men as chairs. Like she didn't sit on a chair. They'd actually have to like kneel down and she'd sit on them. And I was like, I'm from a lineage of a woman who did that. And then here you are telling me, but Muthoni. No.
No. My grandmother.
No, my grandmother sat on men. So you'll take the joke. Deal with it. So for me, when it comes to the legacy thing, it's not I don't care.
Yeah.
And even I was having a conversation with someone about land. And I was like, in like 50 to 100 years, I'll be dead. My cats will be dead. And then there'll be a stranger in my house that I've never met. And I'm just like, I'm here to just live in this moment. I'm like, this is the only life I get to experience. So I want to experience it to the fullest. And my fullest does not involve children.
Fair.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you if you could go back, though, to that like 10-year-old you, 12-year-old you, where you're just trying to get the ideas, right? Or even 18-year-old you when you're making that first pact. What's a piece of information that you would say to that girl? Or maybe you have nieces or other young women in your life who you care about. What's one thing that you're sharing with them?
I think I'd say get to know yourself. Get to know yourself and the things, as in trying to figure out what is you and what is coming from the outside, and then now figuring out, like, for me I would say who's Muthoni and who's Muthoni who's informed by the people around them, like the decisions I'm making, are they informed by in terms of like, oh, I think this would make so and so happy, or this would make Muthoni happy. So for me I always go back to, does this work for me? Because there's even like someone we're having a conversation with in the comment section, and they asked me like, have you had this conversation with your like family members, your siblings, whoever? And in my head I'm thinking, like, it does not bother you, it doesn't concern you. I don't see, like when my sister was having kids, she didn't sit us down and go like, so guys, I'm gonna get pregnant now. What are your thoughts on this? So I don't understand why then I should be like, so guys, I'm not going to have kids. And
isn't that interesting? Huh? That's so interesting that there is that dichotomy. It is literally the same thing.
It is.
And yet our expectation is if you make this decision, it belongs to the community.
Yes.
As opposed to if you decide to take that norm, it's yours.
And the thing is, her having kids impacts us more than me not having kids. Because now suddenly we're all caregivers. Suddenly we're all expected to contribute in certain ways. Be it time, money, you have to be a present auntie and other things. Yeah. I'm like, that's a call we should have received. We should have sat down and decided this as a community.
That should have had votes.
Exactly. Yeah. But when it comes to because I keep telling people, I feel like we ask the wrong question. You should ask people why they want to have children. That's more important because that decision actually impacts another life. My not wanting to have kids affects no one but me. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't affect anyone else. Unless someone's somewhere thinking that I was going to have a child for them to get like a kidney. Yeah. And then I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Because even mine, I'm not going to give you. Okay. Depends with who it is.
But you know, it's interesting because I think on the one hand, there's a beautiful part of our tradition and our culture that values children. Yes. So for me, I remember specifically, I moved back to Ethiopia 6 weeks after I'd had my last born. And at that time, I had 4 kids under 4 years old. There were twins in there, so little freebie along the way. But when I was in the US, we were in Boston at the time, everyone looked at us like with pity in their eyes, like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I remember one of my professors, I was in graduate school, was like, you're pregnant again? So I had this burden to carry, like, wow, you're having another kid. Yeah. As soon as I landed in Ethiopia, they were like, you're the most blessed of women. It was like a red carpet, a spiritual red carpet was rolled out for me. Like, welcome home. There were songs, there were flowers blooming, everything, and so there's this beautiful part of our culture that values children and honors them. We're duplicitous in many ways where we don't take care of those same kids that we honor, but there is this piece, right, that values family and thinks it's beautiful. Yeah. So, on the one hand, I can understand like why we're informed the way we are. We value family. We're connected. And I actually don't want to lose that, right? I don't want to become like the West where it's just me and mine because I've needed people and then I've had to call on favors. But I think maybe your decision feels like a threat to this system of communal living, communal connection, legacy, those big ideas that we pride ourselves in. But then when you peel back the layer, there's some brokenness there. Our education system is not working. Our health system is not working. So then where do these kids that we love and honor go?
Yeah.
In the end, I don't know.
I think there's also the assumption that me being child-free automatically means I do not raise any children, which is a big lie. I have raised enough children to know what mothering constitutes in essence. And just because I'm not birthing kids doesn't mean I'm not involved with the kids around me. Like the sense of community still remains. It's just like I show up in a different manner and I can return them at the end of the day. I can be like, cool, 3 hours was enough. Come get your child.
That's actually so powerful because women are constantly mothering.
Yes.
Constantly mothering. Like if I get a comment, we had a comment the other day on one of our posts, like, can you mentor me? Can you help me? I was like, absolutely, I can. Never met this person. They're a complete stranger. But I'm like, immediately I feel like I must say yes because I'm a woman. I'm an African woman. This is what we do. So that's such a powerful connection to say, I am raising kids. I am mothering. And so I just don't want them to live in my house 24/7.
24/7.
Yeah.
Kids are a lot.
Listen, which is why it does grieve me that when we look at legislation and policy, we think women's rights have to be now restricted to here, and here, because our responsibilities are surely not restricted. They are every single place of our lives. Economically, emotionally, spiritually, we are the ones, holding it up. It's a really powerful statement. It's important. Yeah. When you think about the policy piece, because I think one thing that strikes me about both your story in that it's public. So there are women who have made these decisions, and I've even read quite a lot of women who have made these decisions in secret because they felt like I cannot have another child. Like it is taking away so much from my life. So they make the decision and they kind of process it all alone. Do you see yourself in a policy or advocacy role in the future and taking this beyond your platform to lobbying legislation for changes in our framework? What do you see ahead for you?
Yeah, I definitely see myself heading in that direction because it starts with talking about it. And I think the fact that I've been very vocal about it, I've seen the change and the impact of that. And I was so shocked because sometimes you're just thinking, I'm just sharing my story. I'm just living my life. Yeah. And then someone sends you a message and they say, you give me the courage to go get the procedure. Or you give me the courage to start thinking about the choices that I'm making and living my life intentionally. So I was just like, oh, wow. Okay. So like just the small two videos are making such an impact. Yeah. And I would want that to go down to I would want people to come and be able to, it's not a debate, it's not a conversation, it's not foreign. It becomes like, oh, it's a choice. It's a choice that we make, and we have ways and access to be able to make this choice without feeling guilty, without feeling like we owe society something, and people don't question you because I know there's women who are older than me. We've seen the aunties and the grandmothers, but they never had a term for it. Yeah. And then here we come with a term, and it's like we're solidifying it. And I love there's this old woman. She's foreign, but she talks about how she doesn't like being called granny because she's not a grandmother. She's like, you can call me a witch, but don't call me granny. And I love that because they didn't get to walk the path that I'm walking. Yeah. They had to do it in secret. They had to, because I even know there's people who, to an extent, they'll just say, oh, I can't have children. Because then it's easier than to say, I don't want, because then it becomes like, how dare you? And sometimes we also assume, just because I've said I don't want to have children, you're assuming I'm actually capable of. We don't know if I can even carry a pregnancy to term. Which
goes to that earlier kind of it being in that room with all those assumptions around you that, this is what's best, this is the norm. And so having to even say, I can't have kids, that being easier than saying I don't want to. Yeah. The expectations around women's bodies are just too much. It's like our bodies are not our own. Yeah.
They're everyone else's first. And then they're loaned to us for some time, which is very sad.
Till about 36. And then you know what? After you hit those perimenopause years, do what you want. Do you think, this is an impossible question, but if you were you, but in a 20 years ahead, in a different country, in a different family or context, where there was maybe less of the pressure upon the firstborn African daughter or the assumptions about what family norms are, do you think your decision would have been different?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't know though. Also, there's that. That's a very good question. I don't know.
That's fair.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because I've heard you talk about, even with other women who are child-free, about just the fact that this is what you, in addition to what you observed at age 10, which you observe now about women who, 3 kids in and they're struggling, or you see the men contributing 0 to situations, and adding all that up together, it's a fair conclusion to make, to say, this is not for me. This is not what I want.
Yeah.
Even with the right partner, even with whatever. But then if you were to remove all that, where there was universal, early childhood care, there were subsidies like there are in some European countries. For every child you get, you're getting money. If there was different context for your life, if your decision would be different.
I think if I was still me, I think it would still remain, because even when people are struggling with the decision, I ask them, if you were living your ideal life, would your choice still remain the same? And for me, I know there's this example I tell people: if I went into the shower and it's money that's just coming out instead of water, I would still not want to have children. So I usually tell people to think of, like, if you were living your best life, would your decision be the same? And if the answer to that changes, then maybe it's the circumstances that are making you choose the path. And it's not like, because for me, I know it's not the circumstances. I'd be like, there's a joke I make. I say, God would come down and tell me, Muthoni, you are destined to have the next Jesus, and I would let everyone perish. I would watch you people.
Yeah, I saw you say that online, and I was like, wow, I'm glad that God did not come to you then.
Exactly, because for me, I'm like, that's how solid I am in that choice that I've made. So you have to be very sure about it. You have to be sure about yourself, and regardless of the circumstances, life situations, the economy, all these external factors, the internal factor is the one that, like, what's the true north there?
And I've heard you say that over and over again. I think that's so important. You have to examine yourself over and over again, because number one, it's not easy. You're going to have to walk this path without the emotional support of your society or culture potentially. And you have to be sure, because it is also permanent. And so understanding and educating both your spirit and your mind is hugely important. And I appreciate you supplementing your story with that, because you didn't have to. You could just make it your story and that's that. But I think extending it is what makes you an advocate. It is what makes you somebody who now becomes a resource for other people, which is taking it beyond just having a media platform. So that's huge. Thank you for that. We are in this series and talking about hope, and I saw in your show that you like to ask people about their moment of joy before you start. And we actually usually ask people at the end of every conversation, we ask, what's bringing you joy? It's one of our pillars as well. But for this series, we've been asking people, what's bringing you hope today? So before we let you go, we'd love to hear, what's bringing Muthoni Gitau hope?
Oh, wow. What's bringing me?
I hope there's something.
The way this country is set up. What's bringing me hope? I think creativity. I think I'd say that. I love that even when people are pushed to the edge, in some random way, creative people always just find a way to sort of tell us it's going to be okay. So I think creativity.
Yeah, I love that. There is a quote I often quote. I think it's Toni Morrison who says something to the effect of, I'm misquoting, but when the world falls apart, that's when artists go to work. That's when they make sense of it for us. And I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. Well, Muthoni, thank you for being with us today and sharing your story. It's incredibly intimate and also incredibly important. So thank you for just being available to us and being willing to share. I'm really grateful.
Most welcome.
Thank you. And listeners, we'd love to hear from you. This was one woman's story and one woman's experience. If you have a story around your own choices, we'd love to hear from you. You can drop us a DM at Selam and Hello. And of course, you can also reach us on email. If anybody uses email, I don't know, but you can. producer@selamandhello.com or Lilly, Lilly, @selamandhello.com. And join us next week. I think we have one more episode at least left in our series, The Case for Hope. We don't want you to miss it, so join us next week. And until we meet again, peace.
We're worried, anxious group of people trying to move along. Maybe one day we'll get onto something. Until then we say, hold on. I know it's hard, but baby, you just got to hold on.